My name's Grace Fuller. I'm the Senior Director of Animal Welfare and Research at the Detroit Zoological Society, and I'm also currently the chair of the Animal Welfare Committee for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to a very special episode of the Rossifari podcast. All right, y'all, so one of the perks of going to the AZA Annual Conference every year is getting to meet some really amazing people. And even though I was only there for a limited amount of time this year, I got to meet some really amazing people, including Dr. Grace Fuller. Now, Grace works for the Detroit Zoological Society at the Detroit Zoo, and this is our first time having them on the podcast, and you'll hear me talk about this a little bit in the interview, but I love the Detroit Zoo. It is such a cool place. I can't wait to get back there, and I'm excited to have them join the Rossifari family. But that wasn't the focus of this interview this week. Instead, we talk about the Animal Welfare Committee that the AZA has. And this is one of those things that I think that a lot of people just don't realize exists. And they should, because this is the kind of thing that makes the anti-zoo crowd look even goofier than they normally do, in my humble opinion. Oh, who are we kidding? My opinion is anything but humble. But it's so cool that the AZA has this committee that is constantly looking at the welfare of animals and helping individual facilities advance their welfare programs and stuff. And you'll hear a whole lot more about what happens there and even some really cool examples of some of the research that I got to see being presented when the welfare committee met during the conference this year. And honestly, one of the examples in particular kind of blew my mind, just that it exists. I think y'all are going to really love it. So I'll let Grace talk to you about all of that. But before we get to that, a quick reminder to make sure you're following along. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any of these interview episodes on Tuesdays or any of the Zoo News episodes on Fridays. And of course, make sure you follow along on the socials at Rossifari Pod on the TikTok machine, all the good things. But you know what? I want to make sure that y'all get some good welfare here. So let's get to the interview at this point. Enjoy my interview with Dr. Grace Fuller of the Detroit Zoological Society and the AZA's Animal Welfare Committee. Yes, and today we're going to be focusing more on the committee aspect of things, but I have to tell you, I love your zoo. I love it so much. I've only been there once. I got there once when I was playing in Detroit. But that red panda habitat, that's something. That's real nice. I love that area there. I love the bridge and how you can see them at different levels. And it was years ago that I was there, and it still stands out to me just how fantastic that facility is. So yeah, very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about the welfare stuff. So my guess is that a lot of people don't even know that there's a welfare committee with the AZA, because I think most people think of welfare as an institution-to-institution decision-making process, right? And so tell me about what y'all do.
Sure. So the Animal Welfare Committee is made up of volunteers at a bunch of different institutions across the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and we're really connectors. We're facilitators. I mean, we're here to provide recommendations to people. So, for example, there's an entire accreditation standard. Really, there's several around animal welfare or well-being, which I'll use interchangeably here, but they're not precisely the same thing. But well-being is kind of like what you think it is, right? It's just, is an animal comfortable? Are they healthy? Are they happy? So we make sure people understand how to meet that standard. Everybody is charged with assessing the welfare of their animals in a systematic way. And so people have a lot of questions about the best way to do that. And we help them understand what best practices are. We connect them with experts. We provide resources and training. We want to make sure that everybody working in a zoo understands how their particular role contributes to animal well-being. And we really believe that every single role, from like the person taking your tickets to the CEO, has a huge part to play in the well-being of animals. And so we make sure that we can train people and understand what their role is, how they can help, how they can feel empowered to speak up when they have questions or concerns or they want to help. And we just do everything we can to keep raising the bar so that we're making sure that animal well-being is great, because at the end of the day, that's how we fulfill all the other parts of our mission. It gives us sort of our license to operate, right? Like you have to start at home and you have to have good welfare in your animals before you can move on and do other things.
And I think that's especially important because I feel like for the average person, for the average zoo guest, for the average person who knows what the AZA is, animal welfare is what they think of. Like even me, who I'm involved in conservation work through the AZA and stuff, right? When somebody asks me, oh, what is, people ask me all the time, what is Rossifari, right? And I'm like, oh, I did podcasts, accredited zoos and aquariums. The first question is, what does accreditation mean? What do you mean accredited? And my immediate response is, it means good welfare for the animals. There's a lot of other stuff, but that's what it means to the average public. We're not going to get into protecting the land that you have for a certain number of years or any of the other very important stuff that accreditation covers. But to the average person, it means that animals have good welfare, right? And so I think that's really cool that y'all are able to provide all of that. There are so many ways I could see this conversation going, but I guess the first one that I want to talk about is, isn't it a very changing subject? Don't we constantly learn more about these species? And how do you keep up with all of that?
Sure, that's a great question. I think the Animal Welfare Committee is, as I said, we're connectors. It's really, really important for us to connect with the sort of species experts. So if you know the structure of AZA a little bit, we have taxon advisory groups. So that'll be kind of a group of species sometimes, like there's a snake tag for all the snakes. And we have to kind of partner with them. So most of the people on the Animal Welfare Committee, they have a lot of expertise in animal welfare science. So they might know ways to measure animal welfare using behavior or using physiology, measuring hormones. They have expertise in kind of promoting a culture of animal well-being, but nobody can be an expert on every single species.
No.
But the people in the snake tag know a whole lot about snakes, way more than I do. So I think the magic happens when we work together and we kind of bring our general sort of topical expertise in with their species expertise. And that's really what we're trying to focus on right now. We're actually working on a new initiative. They're called Species Welfare Indicator Guides. And so we're trying to really intentionally kind of write out, like, what are the things you should look for in a salamander, in a snake, more specific, like a type of snake, an indigo snake.
Sure. Right, yeah.
Sure. But again, that's not something that the committee can do on their own. We're going to be working with our species experts to really make those meaningful.
That's cool. I like that. And I have to say, and this is very important, there are too many acronyms in the zoological field, but SWIG is a good acronym. Okay, so Species Welfare Indicator Guide. I'm into calling them SWIGs. That's my contribution to your work. You're welcome.
I appreciate that. We definitely needed a new acronym. So.
Yes, I know. They're never enough.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. How prevalent, let me ask it this way, how prevalent is the knowledge of your group existing to like keepers and stuff and people that are experts? Do they reach out to you, or do you kind of need to be like, all right, who's the baddest binturong person out there who I can talk to about this?
That's a good question. I think we could do more to connect with keepers, and we're trying to do that a little bit. We've been starting to work more closely with AZAC, which is the American Association of Zookeepers, like for that very reason.
Nice.
So they've been kind enough to let me come to their animal welfare committee meetings every month, and then they've been attending our meetings, which is a starting point, because sometimes you do have in all these different levels of management, things don't necessarily get to the person who's actually the one taking care of the animals and probably needs the information more than anybody. The other thing that we've been doing lately is Dr. Katie Hall, who's one of our Animal Welfare Committee members, has been really leading our efforts to start creating webinars that are freely available. And actually quite a few of them are freely available on the AZA Learn platform. And you have to kind of sign up for it, but it doesn't cost anything. And so creating those webinars, we're hoping that gets to animal keepers. Anyone can watch those. We recognize there's two sides to things, right? Like there's doing the science and there's understanding what animals need, but then there's this communications side where we have to make sure that people know about all that science and that the people who are in a position to implement it can actually do that.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. One of the things we were talking before the interview, and I said, I'm amazed. There's so many things that Rossifari has brought into my life and things that have happened that I would have never guessed. And one of the things is I have helped to make a bunch of connections because in the next year, I'll be talking and interviewing someone and they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm really into the welfare of this species and blah, blah, blah. And I feel like I looked up published stuff and there's nothing out there, but I know all this stuff. And I'll be like, I'm going to connect you with Grace. And, and I've done that stuff so often because it's the zoo world is so big, but it's also so small, but it's also so big. And I feel like that's such a weird dichotomy sometimes, but sometimes we just don't even know who the experts are, or we don't know what we have. And it's been interesting to realize that. And it has been an honor to make some of those connections. I think it's very cool. So yeah, I think the PR side of things is more important than I realized, even being on that side of it, which has also helped me with some imposter syndrome because I'm sitting here with Dr. Grace Fuller and I'm a drummer. So, it's a little imbalance there, but I do appreciate that more places are realizing that. I do think that's important. So what is your background? How did you get here?
I wasn't necessarily one of those people who sort of knew from a very young age that this is what I want to do with my life. My mom does take credit for it because she said she took me to the zoo all the time when I was really little. That would be the Cleveland Zoo. That's where I grew up.
Oh, nice. Fantastic facility. Baby red panda and baby tree kangaroo right now. Just saying.
Oh my gosh, that tree kangaroo.
Oh my gosh, I know. It's so good.
But when I was in my 20s, I was doing a master's degree in anthropology, honestly, just because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was like, that's interesting. And my parents were like, oh, great job prospects. But I went with some other students who worked more on the primatology side of things to visit the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo and just for fun, because I wanted to go to the zoo. And I happened to meet their director of conservation and science, Dr. Kristen Lucas. I finally had that light bulb moment of wow, okay, I didn't know that this was actually a career, that there were people working in zoos using behavior and other techniques to understand how animals are doing and then being able to directly apply that research to make their lives better. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I want your job, not your job specifically, because that would be mean. But I was fortunate enough to get a position as a research assistant at that zoo after I graduated with my master's degree. And at that time, Dr. Lucas was in the stages of setting up a PhD program in partnership with Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland. And I applied and I was able to get into that program, and it was an amazing experience because I was able to sort of work for both places. While I was getting my degree, I still was at the zoo doing research. That's kind of how I got my start.
Nice. That's very cool. So especially, loving zoos, but not coming from a I'm going to work in the zoo my whole life thing. What species spoke to you?
Oh gosh, they're also wonderful. But I really fell in love with the nocturnal primates, the slow lorises,
Mhm.
Pato, and I ended up studying them for my dissertation research. So I looked at lighting design for nocturnals because it's really challenging to house a nocturnal animal in a zoo in a way that kind of accomplishes all your goals. Obviously, the primary goal is that that animal has great welfare, and that's really important. But we're zoos. We're there for people to have experience with animals, to engage them, right, to educate them. And if a nocturnal animal is just kind of sleeping the whole time, is it going to necessarily inspire somebody? And so zoos use different techniques to try to get animals to be active. They flip their activity cycles basically using lighting. But we know from human research that light has a huge impact on our health. That's why your cell phone has a blue light filter. And so we realized that, some of the lighting changes that we were making, we didn't have the science to back up if we were doing them right, if they were having an impact on the animals. So I started studying the nocturnal species, and then I ended up working more with slow lorises for my postdoc research after I left Cleveland. And this is my claim to fame. I was bitten by the only venomous primate, but I lived to tell the tale.
That's awesome.
Her name was Angela.
Oh my gosh.
And so yeah, I love a slow loris. They're fantastic.
That's so good. Wow. Okay. That's a heck of a journey. And you do bring up a really interesting point, which is that zoos, accredited zoos, exist for the sake of the animals and for the sake of conservation and all the things we talked about. But also, mommy and daddy really want Joey to see the animals, and you're going to get complaints if you don't. And so, being on a committee that is so just animal focused, do y'all ever have to stop and think about, like, well, our recommendation is going to be that we get rid of all people coming to the zoo because there are shy animals here, right? Like, I mean, at what level do you have to say, like, think about that? Or do you just fully give out the welfare information and then that conversation can happen at the individual facilities? Or how does that work?
A few things, I guess, with that. I mean, for one thing is so much of what we do always comes back to people anyway. I always joke it's funny to work in the zoo because it's people who wanted to work with animals, but then they just all end up having to work with each other. And
so real. And the public. Like, yeah.
So, I mean, I think we're very cognizant of the human side of things with the work we do in the Animal Welfare Committee, whether that's, first of all, the animal care staff, because their well-being is so intimately tied with the well-being of the animals. And then we understand that the visitors or the guests to our facilities have a huge impact as well. But, even if you were to go purely off the science on that, it's not a simple visitor bad or good kind of scenario. It seems to really depend, if you look at all the science, on the species, on the context, on the way the exhibit's set up, how the visitors are behaving, which we can alter, sometimes with the design of things and the signage and other things that we do. So we don't want to put out recommendations that come from a sort of ivory tower that aren't going to be useful to people. So we really try to take all of that into consideration. And I truly believe that if we are doing our best for animal welfare, if we're designing habitats that are really dynamic and that interest animals and give them lots of things to do, that we can achieve both those goals simultaneously, because an animal that's happy and healthy and engaged is going to be one that's a lot more impactful on our visitors too.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense to me. And so something you said triggered a question, and then you kept talking, which is good. That's your job. And I lost it. I hate it when that happens. But let me ask you this then. So, when you talk about the welfare of an animal, right, and you're talking about the research, and you're talking about speaking to experts on each, species or whatever. One thing that I find interesting, so I love training, and I'm big focused on that. I literally had to peel myself away from a conversation with Steve Martin to come and do the interview here, right? I follow him around like a little puppy.
He's amazing.
And yeah, incredible, right? And so one thing that I learned from that team is that behavior is the study of one individual. And yet I feel like when it comes to welfare standards, accreditation standards, or even just like welfare recommendations, we look more at a species level or subspecies level or whatever. What do you think? What do you think about that? What do you think about like how much can you account for the individual versus how much is it best to just look at what we know about the species in their natural habitat and go from there?
Oh, that's a great question. When we talk about how we define animal welfare, the Animal Welfare Committee's definition, oh gosh, I could recite it. I'll try, is an animal's, okay, maybe I can't. But it has to do, I'm not going to get it verbatim, but
Right.
When we talk about the definition, it's an animal's, physical, mental, behavioral, emotional well-being. It's on a continuum from good to poor. It fluctuates, it changes over time. But the first part of that definition is really key. It's an animal. It's one animal because animal welfare and animal care aren't the same thing. Care we give to species based on what we know about those species, but each of those individual animals responds differently to that care, and that's what we mean by welfare. So we have to be really conscious of the fact that, you could have two penguins in a colony that look very similar, because they kind of do.
They do.
But one of them may have been, hand-reared because for whatever reason. One of them might have a sore foot. One of them might just be older, and so they're a little stiff. And so you could give those animals the exact same care, and they're going to experience it totally differently. And so I think knowing things about the species helps set us up for what our best practices should be. But then what we really have to do is ask those individual animals in a sense, because it'd be super nice if they could just tell us, but they can't. But we ask them by their behavior, by other indicators, how they're doing. And we have to really keep in mind that each individual is going to have a different sort of life experience.
That sounds like a tricky balance.
It is, yeah. And then
and that's why you get to have your job, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that makes it really tricky, again, is that there's so many different species, right? At the Detroit Zoo, we have Japanese giant salamanders. A lot of which are amazing, by the way. They're like 4-foot long salamanders.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah, they're really cool. But they, a lot of their life history, their natural history is to pretend to be a rock and wait for something to eat to come by. And so, how do you know how an animal is doing when its job is to pretend to be a rock, for example? Right. So that's where it gets tricky at the species level too, is trying to understand what does good welfare look like for a giraffe versus a giant salamander versus a flamingo.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I actually sat in today for part of the welfare committee presentations meeting, call it what you will. And I was blown away by the nerdy stuff that some of y'all think about. And I say that in the best way as a huge nerd. But one of the presenters said, and I don't know that I'll ever forget this. So I really wanted to know if a sand dollar can get fat. And I was like, why did your brain go there? What? Okay. And so it led to a whole study on sand dollar welfare and body condition. And turns out apparently they can't get very fat because their shells are very hard or whatever. But one of the things I love about coming to this conference is that you get to hear that stuff. And when you talk about animal welfare, I guarantee you that everyone in my audience is picturing, well, okay, so a red panda that's comfortable in a tree, or, birds that fly and caw as they're supposed to, or whatever. But is the sand dollar fat? Was something that no one in my audience thought of. And if you message me and say you did, you're lying. And so I found that so fascinating. And there's so many examples of that kind of stuff, Do you want to talk through some of the things that you found particularly interesting that you guys have discovered, or that people that you've seen present on or something like that just blew your mind? Or does nothing blow your mind because you're so brilliant at this already?
Oh, dear. I'm just trying to think of a good example. Yeah, Jennifer Hensius's example of the sand dollar is really good. Yeah, I think for each individual species, that's where it comes back to the SWIGs, right? The species welfare indicator guides, because it's going to be different from one species to the next. For example, one thing I didn't know about penguins before I started working with them was that they have, this is one of my favorite terms, a catastrophic molt.
Yes.
And so that they have this like 2-week period where they switch out all their feathers, and their old feathers are growing in and pushing out, their new ones are growing in and pushing out the old ones, and they just look so uncomfortable and miserable the whole time, the poor things, and they can't really eat because they're not waterproof. And so, something like that, I honestly hadn't thought much about, quality of molt. I'm sure zookeepers who take care of penguins have been thinking about that for a very long time, right? And so much of what we're doing is just kind of capturing their knowledge and formalizing it and putting it in records and into practice in a more systematic way. But every single species you look at, it's something different like that.
That makes a lot of sense to me, even in terms of penguins, because you're right. I volunteered at Aquarium of Niagara, and I have spent a lot of time with our penguins. And when they're molting, I've only ever thought of it as them molting, even though I care about the welfare of those birds, and I have literally held up laser treatment onto penguins and stuff for their little arthritis and everything. Like, you think about it from that perspective, but yeah, a molt's a molt. I've never considered what kind of molt they're having. And that is really interesting. Yeah, that's very cool. I like that a lot. I really do. And then I guess, I'm curious just from the perspective of, so I know that it's a volunteer position, right? But working at such an incredible AZA facility, do they support you being involved with this at all? Or are they go team?
Absolutely. I don't think I could do it otherwise. So we have a lot of support from our leadership who are really amazing because I'm not going to lie, it takes up a good bit of my time. So thankfully, the Detroit Zoological Society, we've had a commitment to animal welfare for a really long time. Yeah. And so I'm fortunate we have 6 full-time animal welfare staff. And so I have a lot of support. They're the ones at this point really doing the work. And I'm leading them and coaching them, and I'm their cheerleader, and hopefully giving them some useful advice. But without the organizational commitment, it would be really hard to be able to participate in AZA like this.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love that. I'm curious. So when you're looking at animal welfare, there's a term that I've heard frequently that I'd love you to talk about with the audience, which is, and I think I'm using this correctly, activity bank. Am I close?
Activity budget.
I wasn't using it correctly, but I was in the banking world.
Yeah.
I knew it was financial.
I used to be a bank teller. So.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So can you explain what an activity budget is and how you use that to partially assess welfare?
Sure, absolutely. So an activity budget is just how an animal spends his or her time. So this is something that we use behavioral observations to identify. You could kind of guess at it, right? You have a rough idea if you're an animal keeper as to how your animals spend their time. When we get into the nitty-gritty with the welfare science, typically that means we're going out in the zoo with an iPad. We use a program called Zoo Monitor typically to collect observational data on animals. And we're recording how they spend their time. So, your typical ethogram or your sort of list of behaviors that you're expecting to see is going to probably include things like socializing, feeding, resting, investigating, self-maintenance, things like grooming, and all the locomotion, moving around. And so looking at the kind of spread of those activities can kind of give you a sense of how an animal is doing. One of the ways you have to interpret that is compared to some kind of normal, and that can be kind of tricky. So is our basis for comparison, for example, like what animals are doing in the wild? Is it what other animals in other zoos are doing? But, we can kind of get a sense of, if you're looking, for example, at the activity budget of a gorilla, a Western lowland gorilla in a zoo, that's an animal that's going to spend most of their time in the wild foraging. They kind of live in like a big salad bowl and just sit there and eat it. And so if you can be in the zoo, and if you do an activity budget for your gorillas and you find that maybe they're only spending 10% of their time feeding, that would really cause you to take a step back and say, okay, how are we presenting their diet? What is the composition of that diet? What does their habitat look like? Are they healthy? What's going on here? Why are we seeing such a big disparity versus what we might expect? And so that can really give us an idea of how an animal is doing. And it's definitely one of the major tools that we use to understand welfare.
Cool. I like that. Now, that does lead to an interesting question, because this is something I think about a lot. Part of me thinks it makes a lot of sense to look at wild animals activity budget, not bank, and say, hey, we should be replicating that, right? And then part of me thinks that the reason that most animals live longer in zoos and have a better quality of life in good zoos is because we give them things that aren't from the wild, right? That we give them veterinary care is the first thing that comes to mind, and not having a predator there and all that stuff. And so I wonder if you have an opinion on whether sometimes, like, the activities that animals do in the wild, they do that way not because it would be the best thing for them, but because they have to. Like, the example that I always think of is elephants, right? The anti-zoo crowd loves to say, oh, elephants walk, 40 miles a day or whatever. And I'm like, they do. They absolutely do. And you're right, they're not walking 40 miles a day in a zoo. However, if they don't walk 40 miles a day, they're going to destroy the area around them and not have any food and die. And humans, before we invented things like Netflix and chilling, were doing the same thing. Not 40 miles a day, but we were nomads. We moved. We were hunters and gatherers. All that stuff. So part of me, I guess, and I'm not phrasing this super well, but I hope you see where I'm going with this, which is like, is it ever worth considering that, like, since we aren't in the wild, sometimes animals won't need to do the stuff that's in the wild, and maybe that's not the worst thing for them, and maybe that's even backed by the fact that we have long-living species and stuff like that?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yes. This is something that lives in my brain rent-free. I think about this as I fall asleep like twice a week.
I think that you're onto a lot of really important points. One of them is, yeah, absolutely. The zoo is not the wild, and it never will be. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it might be a less good thing. There's certain experiences of being in the wild that we don't want to replicate for animals in zoos. A lot of animals that live in the wild have, like, a lot of parasites. We try very hard not to replicate that experience. Or, like you said, they might have to spend a long time, migrating or walking, and they're doing that because they need to find resources. And that's not necessarily the case in the zoo. So, sometimes it's a good thing that they don't have some of those needs in the wild. But on the other hand, we want to make sure that we're not taking away things that give their lives purpose in the zoo. And an animal, there's a really clear relationship between animal well-being and having a sense of agency, having control over their environments. There's have you ever heard of contra freeloading?
No, I have not.
Okay. So contra freeloading is a phenomenon that's been described and seen in a whole bunch of different animals, which basically says if you give an animal, like, a pile of food, at the same time you present them with food in some kind of puzzle, a lot of times animals will choose to work for the food, not just take the free lunch.
Wow.
And that's called contra freeloading. And the idea is that...
oh my God, it's literally... contra, opposite of freeloading.
Yeah.
That's amazing. When you said freeloading, I was like, this is going to turn into a joke about, like, a teenager or a 20-year-old staying home too long. It's literally that, only for animals. Okay, that's fascinating. Go on. That's amazing.
So the idea, I think, is that, we're all wired, humans and animals alike, to investigate our surrounding, to explore things, to get rewards. And again, an animal in the wild, like, that's going to be a huge primary drive for them. I need to find food or mates or shelter or what have you. So if we let them be too much of a freeloader and we give them all of those things, then what do they have to give them purpose? What are they going to fill that time with that they would have spent foraging? And so that's kind of the philosophy. That's the start of where environmental enrichment comes from. This idea that we need to bring things into their environment that stimulate them cognitively, that encourage them to express natural behaviors that give them agency. If I do this action, I get a reward. And contra freeloading, again, it's something you see in almost any species. Just having your actions result in a reward is in and of itself gratifying, and it contributes, we think, to animal welfare.
Nice. That's very cool. And that leads right to another kind of controversial topic, which I know that there's a little bit of discussion right now about whether enrichment needs to be naturalistic or not. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts or have seen any studies on that.
I'm not sure about studies. I feel like I may have seen a scientific paper a while ago kind of looking at visitor perceptions of enrichment, and it didn't really find that visitors were as concerned about how naturalistic it looked as maybe sometimes we think they are.
Nice.
But I couldn't cite it or provide you with any real evidence.
Sure.
But that sounded good to me.
I believe you.
I liked it. I thought it sounded like a great conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, because my area of interest is animal welfare, I think we're going to focus on what works first. But we also are cognizant, again, of the fact that we have guests and we want them to have an experience. And we probably want to be careful about how we depict animals as being too separate from their natural environments. One of the huge challenges to animal welfare, I'm going to be a bummer for a minute.
No, do it.
One of the huge challenges we have to animal welfare nowadays is the exotic pet trade.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think part of the concern is that if you show an animal using human toys or you show an animal in a really non-naturalistic environment, it could contribute to that perception that, okay, well, maybe that animal could be in my house and would make a good pet, and it wouldn't. And so I think that's part of the reason why we try to focus on naturalistic enrichment. Personally, I love the balance that we have at my facility at the Detroit Zoo. We try to go for a naturalistic type option. And usually that fits with our philosophy of enrichment anyway, because when we're giving an animal enrichment, we're trying to encourage some sort of behavioral goal. We want to bring out some kind of natural behavior. And that probably means interacting with something similar to what they might encounter in the wild anyway. But if we have a goal, if we have an animal, our sea otters are a good example. The sea otters that live at the zoo, incredibly intelligent animals, need a ton of enrichment to stay engaged. If we don't feel like we necessarily have something naturalistic to meet their goal, then we just give them whatever works. So, we don't want like perfect to be the enemy of the good. Is that the phrase?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, we're just hitting all the controversial topics in a row. I don't know why. That was not the plan, but
I love it. Bring them on.
Yeah, no, it's great. But well, it's interesting because it's funny because another conversation is the not a pet. Very important. Love it. Hashtag not a pet. All the things, right? But I've seen the studies. I've read the studies, or at least 2 or 3 of them, about that thing, including the one that the Sloth Institute used to push their No Sloth Selfies campaign, which, cool. But all of the ones that I have read are based on social media reactions. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that not every person who says, OMG, I want one squee, actually wants a sloth. And I'm not even saying would go down the road of getting into the illegal trade, right? I have this wildly viral video where I played drums with an elephant. And you know what, like, the #1 comment was? Holy crap, I want an elephant in my band.
Oh, gosh.
Not one of those people wants an elephant, And so I do think it is a very valid concern. I think it's a very valid conversation. I have not yet seen an actual comprehensive study that looks at the effects on the pet trade versus the effects of having, again, I had a tree kangaroo video that got over 5 million views. And the #1 comment again was, OMG, looks like a Pokemon, I want one type thing, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody's trying to get a tree kangaroo from that. They're all people in the Midwest who are not stealing a Matchie's tree kangaroo. I promise you that, On the other hand, a whole bunch of people didn't even know the species existed and started doing other research. And I started putting out other information about tree kangaroos. So, where is the balance between, is there a risk that post will encourage a few people? And there's a bad pet trade in Papua New Guinea. I acknowledge that. But how many people saw it and fell in love with this new species and did research and went and checked out the zoo's website or the zoo's Instagram and learned more about conservation? And in my mind, I haven't seen a study that compares the two yet, because I do think welfare, I know we're talking about the welfare of the animals in the zoos, but you also have to think about the welfare of the animals in the wild, right? That's what conservation is in a way, And I don't know. I just find that topic, again, it's just a topic I'm very passionate about. I'm curious if you have thoughts about it, even though that's not your field, but we're just sitting here, Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, it is something I'm really interested in and passionate about. So I mentioned one of my favorite animals is the slow loris, and I did my postdoctoral research, my little postdoc job, after I finished my PhD studying slow lorises. And the person that I worked with runs what's called the Little Fireface Project.
That's a really good name. I like that.
And her name is Dr. Anna Neckeris. And she's in the UK, but she's done research actually linking, the uptick of slow lorises on YouTube to literally the numbers of slow lorises available in markets in Indonesia for sale. So there's definitely a link. We know that it's there. I think we probably almost know more about that link than we do about the other example that you talked about, the flip side of that, right? The people who saw the animal and got really inspired and actually, decided to hold their own bake sale to, contribute to their conservation. So it's a really nuanced thing. I think we have to be really careful about how we depict animals and how we interact with them. And I think it's really challenging to research too, because these are longer term things, going to the zoo and getting inspired by an animal and then maybe turning that into, a conservation donation or even a career. We don't track people for those long term actions. So quantifying how zoos and interacting with animals in general influence people is something really challenging. And I'll leave that to the social scientists. I think they know more about it than I do, but I think that both things are probably true at the same time. It can go either way. And so maybe that's where the research needs to focus, is what are those specific features that might push people in one direction versus the other?
Yeah, no, I find it fascinating. And part of why I find it fascinating is that I talk to so many people in this field who are first, and I'm one of them, our first interaction, our first thing that we did with an animal that blew our minds and made us fall in love with animals, completely unethical.
Yeah.
I rode an elephant when I was like 4 years old that was brought to a park in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. I don't even want to know how the heck that happened. And it was an elephant, there was nothing accredited about that, right? It was not good. But holy cow, what a life changer. And that led to all the good that I've done. And obviously there were many other steps along the way, and I do not think that should be a thing. So I do agree that even when there is positives, the negatives can outweigh. I just think it's hard because we don't really know the impact on both sides. And also what is acceptable. Are 4 new conservationists worth 1 new animal in the pet trade? And that's, like you said, that is neither one of us can answer that.
Big question.
It's a real, I know, it's heavy, right?
Yeah.
But it is, I do feel like I talk to so many people who are so amazingly involved in this world that were inspired by YouTube videos, by, Instagram posts, by seeing a person with a red panda, with a tree kangaroo, whatever. And so I find it very interesting. And I don't think the research is fully there yet. I hope it gets there because I'm very willing to, like you said, with the slow lorises, you've seen that too. Oh, okay, that's fair, very fair. I don't even know how you decide what's acceptable and what's not at that point, And I have to think about that because I run social media for all of this, and that's how I get my messaging out. And social media will show your stuff more if your face is in it. It's just how algorithms work. Mm. So it's like, I can reach, I think on average, 2 to 3 times the amount of people if my face is in one of the pictures.
Wow.
And there are ways to do that without fully interacting with the animal, and I know that. But when there's a picture of me with a red panda, feeding a red panda, it's going to reach 20, 30, 40,000 people and have good conservation messaging. But then also, is it going to make some of those people, again, illegal pet trade is a real thing. So yeah, it is an interesting balance. I really like the Not a Pet campaign that the AZA has going on. I think using that messaging can help. But yeah, interesting. We went off the rails in this interview. we just hit all the things, all of the controversy. I like it. I know we've both kept looking over. So Sarah from the AZA is watching us, and we've both looked over multiple times, just being like, "We good? We good? But we're good." Okay, so yes, she hasn't come running over and screamed yet. So.
I love it. I mean, I love the really nuanced ways you're thinking about all this stuff, and we don't have all the answers. Nobody does, and that's sort of job security for me, which is great. But yeah, things aren't black and white. It's really complicated. So I'm glad that you're presenting it that way.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So is there anything else you want to say about what the committee does or any of that stuff?
Sure. Let me So right now, I think I talked a little bit about the types of stuff that we're working on. One of the things we're really focused on, again, is helping people understand how to assess animal welfare. So the meeting with the Fat Sea Star that you went to was one of those. Was something that we pulled together for exactly to do what we do, which was to bring together people who are experts on particular species and then talk to them about how they can be doing welfare assessments and how they can do them more effectively. So I think right now what we're really interested in demonstrating is that we know that in the last 10 years, especially, that the Association of Zoos and Aquariums has really, really focused on animal well-being, and that they have a whole set of strategic priorities for animal well-being, and that they're putting the funding behind that. So one of the things the committee does is review the Animal Care and Wellbeing Grants Fund applications. There's a whole lot of really smart people trying to do science in zoos and try to figure out how we can care best for animals and what's best for them. And so, just trying to help people continue to raise the bar on what they're doing is a huge focus for us. And then trying to get that out there with our webinars. But again, we're also really trying to think about how to target the cultural piece of things. And there's some great people in the committee working on that as well. Creating training. We want to put something out there so that everybody at a zoo can really understand their contribution to animal well-being. And so some of our committee are working on training that can be adapted for each zoo to share with all their employees and really explain, how everyone can contribute to welfare. So, we're coming at it from the science and this culture angle and the communications angle. It's all of those things at once. It just takes all of us working together to kind of push things forward, and a lot of really dedicated, smart volunteers. So I'm just really proud of them and happy for the work they're doing.
That's awesome. I love that. Is there a conservation organization or two that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Well, I already gave a little shout out to the Little Fireface Project, working with slow lorises, and they've done some work too, looking at the well-being of slow lorises in zoos in Asia and in other parts of the world. Looking at the pet trade, and then they do great work also just understanding those species in the wild. And the slow loris will always be near and dear to my heart, so definitely need to give them a shout out. There's a lot of great gorilla conservation work going on. So I feel like I am Grace, so I'm going to give a shout out to Grace, which is the Gorilla Rehabilitation and Conservation Education Center in the Congo. They're doing really amazing work, taking care of orphan gorillas, rehabilitating them. They're starting to look at the process of releasing animals into the wild. The Detroit Zoo's worked really close with them for a very long time. One of our head veterinarian is on their board, and they're just doing amazing work in a really challenging place, and really working with local communities there too, because the Congo is a challenging place for people as well as animals for a variety of reasons, and they never forget that. They're really embedded in the community and doing great work with the people and the gorillas. And so, Grace, we'll give a shout out to you, Grace.
Nice, love it.
It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show, but there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
All right. My favorite poop story concerns a swamp monkey. Have you ever met a swamp monkey?
Not met, but I've seen.
Yeah,
Yes.
pretty cool.
Yes.
They're really interesting little kind of old African monkeys. Live in sub-Saharan Africa. But this is really a story about how we research animal well-being. So one of the things that I did during my PhD, and that I still do at Detroit, or when I went to Detroit, I built their endocrinology lab. So endocrinology is the study of hormones, and we use that to understand how animals are doing, because we can study them non-invasively in things like feces. And that leads me to a problem that you've probably never thought about, which is if you have a group of monkeys and you want to collect a fecal sample from one of them, how do you know whose poo is whose? So we have techniques for this. One of those techniques is to feed the animal something that's going to come out the other end. So a lot of times we use food coloring, or we'll use glitter, or in this case, we were using little inert like plastic beads, like non-toxic little beads. And each of the swamp monkeys was getting a different color so that we could identify whose fecals were whose, and then we could take them in the lab and we could analyze their hormones. But we started discovering mystery rainbow fecals that had all the colors in them and could not figure out what was going on until one day observed, and this is where the story does get a little gross, that one of the monkeys was picking the beads out of the samples.
Oh, no.
And snacking on them and producing the rainbow fecals. So this is one of the, never a problem I thought I'd have in life, but there you go.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
It was really fun. Thank you.
I love it so much. I love that this committee exists and that they're doing such cool research, and that the incredible facilities involved, like the Detroit Zoo, are allowing their staff to be a part of this and encouraging them and helping them do it. It's so cool. There's so much good stuff that is happening facility to facility, and also at, the AZA level in general, that people just don't know about. And it's been such a privilege and an honor to share some of those things with y'all. And I'm looking forward to sharing more of those with you as we continue on with this podcast. Before we get going, I do want to take a moment to say thank you to all of my patrons, especially my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Shank, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, Melissa Reed, Carrie Kirkpatrick, John Lewis, who is also here for stickers, Kevin Williams, and Cormac McMuffin. Meow. And I'd like to remind y'all that we'll be back here on Friday with a Zoo News episode. But until then, remember, friends, the word credits backwards is Steiderk.
The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari, or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.